Alright, I'm gonna call the meeting back to order. Take a motion to seal the minutes from the non-public session.
Motion to seal the non-public minutes?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor, aye and aye? Jen?
Aye.
Bob? Russ? Aye. John?
Aye.
And I'm gonna make a motion for the newsletter in the amount of $11,781, which was the warrant article that was passed at our town meeting for the purpose of printing, postage, and distribution costs for 8 issues of the newsletter, Brentwood newsletter.
Do I have a second? I'll second the motion. Any discussion?
I'd like to know if, Michelle and Robin, if you're okay with me reading the memorandum, or
Sure.
is everyone okay with me reading the memorandum? Yes?
It's up to them.
I'm asking if you guys are okay. So, okay. This came to us today. We got this today, 5:10. In an ongoing effort to clarify the policies, procedures, and general practices of the Brentwood newsletter, BNL, requested by Selectman Russ Kelly, following last week's meeting, we offer the following for greater understanding. As a matter of practice, articles, announcements, and public notices contributed to the BNL from individuals and organizations are clearly attributed to author or source organization. When possible, internet links are provided to further personal research and general knowledge. Information received from individuals and organizations is printed with permission. When considering content from outside sources, we will review credibility, value, and relevance to our community. The BNL does not develop or curate opinion pieces. Authors may offer their own perspective on topics that interest or concern them in a factual, relevant, and civil manner. Contributed material intended to express an opinion or point of view will be clearly attributed as such to the individual author, group, or organization expressing that view. Counterpoints are welcome in response or as standalone submissions in the following issue. The BNL reserves the right to limit rebuttals to previously submitted opinions to the following issues. BNL values all opinions and provides a public forum for diverse views. However, submissions previously printed or posted in other public forums may be rejected. The BNL reserves the rights to reject unproductive, non-relevant material or submissions that personally name other individuals, authors. Submitted such materials are notified when they do not comply with our integral practices. The BNL strives to respond in a timely fashion to submissions that do not meet our minimum guidelines. However, the BNL is not obligated to respond to nor publish any submissions. We promptly acknowledge the correct procedure errors made by the BNL. Opinion pieces submitted by individuals are solely those of the writers and, as presented, are not intended to reflect the official opinion of the BNL nor the town of Brentwood's governing body, and are printed with no intention to malign anyone or anything. Writers of material submitted but not published by the Brentwood newsletter retain the right to publish their submission in any other public forum or format. By submitting content to the BNL, authors allow the BNL to use that content at their discretion. This includes but is not limited to emails, articles, news pieces, announcements, and photographs. Submissions rejected does not negate the author's right to publish elsewhere, nor does rejection of the BNL open their communication to public scrutiny. Authors may request anonymity for individual submissions. Writers with legitimate concerns must contact the Brentwood newsletter directly to discuss and may be published as name withheld. Readers should not misconstrue materials printed in the Brentwood newsletter from identified organizations as submissions by individuals. Likewise, information from state and local agencies and organizations, public announcements, real estate listings, and other information obtained from public sources will occasionally run for general public knowledge. The BNL reserves the right to adopt, modify, and implement additional policies, practices, and procedures as needed. Our current mission statement and policies will be updated, published, and available to the reader on our website at brentwoodnewsletter.org. And this came to us today at 5:10.
Any other discussion?
We've talked about this a lot. It sounds like the first outreach to the BNL to start working on some sort of an agreement was last fall. It's now 6 months later, and we've had I think there's been 5 or 6 or 8 hours of discussion just in the past couple of weeks about this. The goal here was to meet the town's request from last year for some sort of accountability, editorial oversight, openness, and some things that we feel are required for that are not in this document. Some things that we asked for are not in this document. And I personally am not secure in reading this that it will prevent the things from happening that have happened over the past 3 years. I don't think this is in the best interest of the town.
Yeah, so I have a few things. I think ultimately the relationship is broken. I think that there is a lack of trust on both sides at this point. As we, continue to listen to arguments of how we got here, it seems clear, at least to me, that it's the disagreements over the appropriateness of some opinion pieces published in the newsletter. Accusations also that editorial decisions led to the rejection or shortening of some submissions from town residents and town departments. Now, without trust, it's always going to be difficult to reach a compromise. But the lack of trust is only one of 2 major obstacles, in my view, that have prevented us from reaching that compromise. We happen to, have a disagreement over a major fundamental fact. The previous board, which included 3 members of this current board, unanimously, correct me if I'm wrong, please, Karen, supported the idea of drawing up a contract and giving that a shot. That decision was based on a prior public meeting or public hearing at the BRC where many members of the public suggested a contract would be a reasonable solution. The contract was a significant part of the discussion on this past town meeting day in the context of whether the town should fund the newsletter. The primary representatives of the newsletter team, Robin and Michelle, have since made it clear that they're not willing to sign a contract. And for 2 weeks, we've had discussions with Robin and Michelle in an attempt to find a compromise. I believe we were nearly there with a written agreement or a memorandum of understanding. In my view, this submission today at less than an hour before we met as a board does not adequately address the issues that we've discussed previously. In the course of the discussions, I know that this fundamental major disagreement is over whether the board must vote to fund the newsletter based on the town meeting vote. That to me is a major misunderstanding that seems impenetrable. It seems there's 2 sides. One believes that the board is bound by that vote, and the other says it isn't. And there seems to be no movement from either side. So as far as I've been led to believe as a selectman, it's the legal interpretation of it is that we are not bound by that town meeting vote. So long as we're in disagreement over that fundamental issue, I don't see how we can get to a compromise when you factor that in with the lack of trust. If ultimately the decision tonight from the board is to not fund the newsletter going forward, of course, it does not mean the end of the newsletter. It means that the town would no longer be giving money to this particular separate entity that is currently producing the newsletter. A consistent theme from the newsletter team in their public comments is that they are a separate entity from the town and that they don't want to be micromanaged. And I don't know how, given everything that's happened, that wish can be fully realized unless the newsletter is officially separated from the town in this way. I think it's extremely unfortunate that a compromise could not be reached that would satisfy everyone on this entire board, because I don't think the hill that we had to climb collectively was all that treacherous or steep. So, you know, I feel like there has to be a way forward that we can have accountability, that somehow we can restore trust. But I'm fearful at this point that we're at the point of no return.
Any further discussion? So I have a motion on the floor. Can I just take the vote, Michelle, and then I'll let you talk,
Be
or
irrelevant, wouldn't it?
go for it?
I'm curious, Russ, what it is that you think we have not addressed.
Well, I've been told I can't discuss it because it's part of the.
So,
No.
your request was that the negotiations be confidential, so if you want him to talk about what he wanted to see out of the negotiations that didn't transpire, then that's your right to,
Our request for confidentiality was between these members and us, not disclosing it to any media or anyone else until things were worked out between us.
so things have not been worked out yet, so
Certainly.
it's up to you if you want.
I would like to know what particular thing you feel we have not addressed. Are you okay
Yep,
with him sharing
she's-
that? Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So there's no confidentiality now, so you can go ahead and disclose it,
Okay.
right?
Yep, I'm good with it, you good with it?
And the original contract is already public, I believe. That was meant to be the
Yes.
jumping off place. So there's things in that contract that also don't appear in here.
And can we can just to be clear, he's not under no obligation to respond
Correct,
at this.
but he wants to.
No, I just want to make sure.
That's transparency, John? Thank you, Russ.
All right. There are a couple places in the document that you provided this evening. In particular, there's a part that says the BNL is not obligated to respond to. That language, which I had previously highlighted, which we all had previously highlighted, that there should be an obligation that people get a response if their piece is not published. So that part is in there that you're not obligated to respond. The other piece is the second to last paragraph. Authors may request anonymity. This was another thing we specifically talked about. The language that you provided here says that you can publish stuff with name withheld, and that you can publish things from organizations occasionally run for general public knowledge. It's in the same paragraph as the anonymity, which, you know, to me, runs counter to the transparency aspect of it, of making sure that all opinions are made clear that that's what they are, and that there is not this ability for people or you to publish things that aren't attributed to somebody.
There was an instance where somebody submitted an article, or not even an article, a paragraph more or less, complaining about something that he saw in town. Something that he continued to see in town. He asked that his name be withheld because he didn't want fallout, retribution, whatever you want to call it. It was nothing political. It was just a guy wanted to make a statement and didn't want his neighbors to retaliate. Yes, I'm trying to keep my word. So what you're saying is that's not okay. See, that's what we're looking at. I'm not sure what you're contemplating would be printed without a name, but that is a live example, a real example
Yeah,
of a
if
case
some-
where we withheld a name.
Yeah, if someone,
I think it's predictable.
if there's a,
It's been a long time.
if there's someone who puts in, you know, pro-mask or anti-mask in schools, right? And it just appears on a page that's not an opinion page. If there's material from Save SAU 16 that they've been promoting that shows up on a page that's not indicated what the context is, it's just put in there as a criticism of the school system. If there's a block in there that has criticism of the school system for being sued, in someone's opinion, too often, and it's not attributed to anybody, that's the kind of stuff that I feel that if it was covered in here, then it's you saying, we get it, those things happen, we're okay with making sure everything is accountable, everything is attributable going forward. So there's no question about if I'm reading that the library's doing this program, basketball signups are open, and oh, by the way, we shouldn't have masks in school. You know, that kind of thing doesn't happen. That you're saying, we're gonna make sure opinion is called opinion, and it is attached to somebody, whether it's the editorial folks or whether it's somebody who submitted it. And that will help, in my opinion, restore trust in that. And I mean, obviously, if somebody is having a problem in town, I don't know what the example you're using. I mean, I'm not trying to, you know, say that we want to expose somebody who's going to get embarrassed or whatever. It's really hard to answer your question because I don't have any idea what the example is. But obviously, this is about political agenda. This is about divisive issues, and I'm not talking about, you know, as you used the example before, if there's a, you know, a shooting range event for youth or something like that. I'm not talking about that as a divisive issue. I think at this point, we have enough examples of that, of what a divisive issue is, and how we might have done things better in the past. But that's where that comes from, and that's why that particular paragraph, to me, just, again, it speaks to why does it have to exist? Why can't we reach that compromise and have folks who have complained and have, you know, legitimate issues say, oh, okay, the newsletter folks were willing to come our way a little bit on that one, and maybe going forward we're going to see a newsletter that deals with things that are going on in town, the Guardian Club, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the Historical Commission. and then, news items and all that, and then if you're like me, you get to the opinion section and you toss it aside, because I couldn't care less about the opinions in there. But that's where we're getting to.
So, in the third paragraph of the document that Bob read earlier, it says, contributed material intended to express an opinion or point of view will be clearly attributed as such, and to the individual author, group, or organization expressing that view.
Yeah, that's why I feel like the second to last paragraph contradicts that paragraph.
So,
That's why I don't understand why it's in there.
for an example, like I just said to you, you're looking at it from a control standpoint. We're looking at it as, my neighbor Joe wants to say this thing about, that he saw, express an opinion about what he saw. I'm not talking about any of the volatile issues that have been brought up over the last couple of years. I'm not talking about that. But what you're saying is, we can't allow our neighbor Joe to say, hey, I saw this pile of trash on the road, on this particular road. It happens all the time. I'm so tired of seeing the trash on this road. What you're saying is we can't allow Joe to say that without putting Joe's name on it. That's what that statement is, at the end, is trying to do. And as you can see, we said contributed material intended, I just read it to you. So I don't think it's fair for you to say that we've not addressed that concern.
Okay.
I'll also add that the Supreme Court has touched in on anonymity. I'll send you the court cases, but I wrote about it in an essay on freedom of speech. The Supreme Court says that it is encouraged that people allow anonymous opinion or anonymous content, just because there's a stigma to certain people, and when you print it, people don't listen to it anymore, and so anonymity is allowed to get important points across, and that's why it's there. Honestly, I'm not sure that you've looked at a newsletter, because the opinion section is very clearly marked opinion. I'm taking a lot of heat about marking it opinion and what belongs in opinion and what doesn't, but opinion goes in that section.
This is where the conversation gets difficult, You make an assertion that I've never looked at a newsletter.
I'm just asking.
It's just Robin, it's just counterproductive to having a conversation. I've been respectful to you. I haven't made accusations of you. All along, I've been respectful. And to make an assertion that I've never looked at a newsletter, it's like, this is what I'm talking about at the top.
You just said you don't read them.
I don't read the opinions.
We're gonna
It's
have order,
true.
You
please.
just said that.
Yeah, I
Sir.
stopped reading it a long time ago,
Russ, please.
and that's
don't.
my choice, right? And we've talked about this. I can't believe in this day and age we have a problem with me saying I don't read opinion pieces. I mean, really?
Section is marked opinion is what I'm trying to.
No, but the problem, as has been stated multiple times, is that things that were not, that were clearly someone's opinion somehow ended up not on that page. So yes, the page.
There's never been anything about masks or anything like the examples that you brought up. You don't do that.
Yeah.
I think there may have been one occasion that might have happened. And I'd like to think you give us credit for learning from that situation.
I do.
And seeing if that has
I
happened
do,
again.
but I do, and that's why and I know that, others have felt the same way. It's just odd to me that you were resistant to taking credit for that in this document that we've been trying to work on for 2 weeks.
Well, because you're looking at it like this, and I just explained to you how we're looking at it, and trying to give other people the opportunity to share something without
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
retaliated against if they choose to do
You're-
that.
I guess to turn it around on you, you're assuming that if you print something from a neighbor who says there's trash left everywhere and it says anonymous, that somehow that's gonna be brought up as an issue. I mean, it's just like, it just doesn't, it's not what we're talking about. It's not why there was a BRC filled with 100 people. It's not why there was a contract created by the previous board. It's not why there's been, who knows how many emails and comments sent in and brought up in this forum and others. It has nothing to do with Joe Smith who thinks there's too much litter in town, and you know that.
But, well,
Right, let's-
but what I'm saying is, that person asked for that, and what you're saying is, if you take that out, that person doesn't have that opportunity. That is what you are doing.
Can I make a comment about the anonymity? Because I think this illustrates something really important here. I fully respect what you say about anonymity, and I think that you are an independent company that should be allowed to self-govern, right? And I actually got a really helpful email from somebody in town that reinforced that, right? This is why we are not going to be able to come to a good agreement, because you are an independent
Well, we
company.
haven't voted on that yet.
Well, I'm saying I do not feel this agreement in front of me is satisfactory, and I do not think we can get there for this exact reason. You have every right to run your company the way you see fit. We have a right as a select board to have a newsletter that we feel meets the needs of the town. And at some point, those two things have diverged, and that's okay. I mean, that's what happened. And over the past 3 years, the model that we had has not worked well for the town. So I respect everything that you say about, you know, anonymity is supported by the Supreme Court. That's true. If you value anonymity at the Brentwood Newsletter, Inc., that is absolutely your right. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's what we think is best for the town. And that's the inherent awkwardness of a separate town, a separate company producing a town newsletter. And it's something that I'm not sure we can get past. So I respect your ability to self-govern, and I think that's where we're gonna hit these impasses, is that this is a town newsletter. And that makes it, that's why all these complications have arisen, is you have every right to self-publish a document. It just doesn't necessarily mean that we think taxpayer money should be used to fund that. That's what I'm trying to explain there.
Incidentally.
All right, there's a motion on the floor. At this point, Michelle, nothing you say
Maybe
is
it would, because
gonna change.
she's never talked to us. She's never asked us questions. I mean, maybe it would. Maybe there's something else that Russ doesn't understand.
I just talked to you at the last select board meeting for like an hour when we were negotiating this contract.
Yes, but you talked to us. You didn't ask us questions. You have not made an effort to understand any of this, okay?
That's not correct.
You've been fed a dialogue, okay? And you haven't worked at all to learn about that, nor has the person on the other side of that computer.
Michelle, that's
I
not
give Russ-
correct. No one has
Can I
fed me a
speak?
dialogue.
Can I speak? Russ took the time. I'm not sure he's asked all the questions he needed to ask, because we did walk away that day with a different idea. But I'm just trying to clarify some things, because the vote you're about to take is an important one.
Sure.
Oh,
So
you're going back and-
you are still uncomfortable with the fact that we want to allow people to not put their name if they don't want to, in a situation like that. I'm not talking
No,
about a political issue, I'm talking very generically. If you're not okay with that statement, then we can't do it.
Mhm.
Okay, we're trying to cover all of the bases.
Mhm.
We're looking at this much more broadly than the original contract that Karen sent to us,
Mhm.
which was very restrictive and very one-sided.
Mhm.
Okay, we're trying to look at it from a broad standpoint, from an aspect of the people who actually do the work.
Yeah, I mean, again, in that situation, I don't have an issue with anonymity for that person. I mean, I don't know, again, what the purpose is, but I don't have an issue with that. Question on non-response to people who are rejected, or if their piece is significantly, shortened, which has been an issue. What's your feeling on that as far as why that wasn't part of your version?
Non-response? Well, for the most part, there's always a response. There are people in this room who have submitted articles, you have. So, and they'll be able to speak to this, but when something doesn't meet a guideline, I have reached out to them, I do that. There are certain individuals who think that bullying works well, and that's where the non-response. I'm not obligated to continue to answer endlessly. And that's why, you know, we're volunteers, there are different people that handle different aspects, and I can't force them to answer people.
So,
And we don't, not everything comes in a civil manner.
yeah, so there could be a case where it comes extremely late.
That happens a lot.
Right.
There are certain individuals that send in the 15th at 11 p.m.
Yeah.
And by that point, we're pretty much done, and we gotta get going. And it
So again,
doesn't make sense to relay out a whole issue because one person feels that they can submit at 10, 11 o'clock at night on the deadline and still make it in.
all right, I understand that. And then if somebody submits something to you that you feel, just to get the language right, I think the word divisive is in your version, right? Like if you felt it was particularly divisive
Yep.
and you were like, you know what, we're not going there.
I don't wanna
Right.
fight.
You make an editorial decision, we're not going there. And then that person submits the same thing the next month, and the next month, and the next month. What you're saying is, at some point, you're not gonna respond to them.
Sure.
So that, I guess that leads me to my next, I get it. I guess that leads me to my next, or the next point that was brought up. There was a section that we discussed only briefly when it was me and Andy. But it was, I guess, subsequently discussed with Bob. And that is the idea that if someone submits something and it's rejected, that it's kept on file, and if there is the scenario that would play out would be if somebody says, I went to Robin and I asked her and she wouldn't tell me. I'm just saying, this is a hypothetical. And she wouldn't tell me what was going on or why it wasn't printed, right? And then we say, Robin, is that true? And you say, no, it's not true. I did discuss that, right? And it was divisive because X, Y, Z, right? And the way the language was revised by me to try and make it more palatable was that something like that could be requested by the board or the town, I should say, to say, can we see this product? And you have a 14-day period to respond to that. It almost, and I know that didn't make it into your version that you submitted this evening. But I almost wonder why, because I almost think that maybe that's helpful to resolution of some of these issues that might come up, because I know that from my standpoint, after talking to you, that if someone comes to me with a complaint about the newsletter going forward, that's my first question, is have they talked to you? And if they say yes, but Robin didn't, then I'm gonna come to you, and I'm assuming that's okay with you.
It's absolutely fine.
But that level of accountability, accountability is not the right word, transparency. I just wonder your thoughts on that, I guess, as to, I know it didn't make it in to your final version. So I don't know if you could speak to your feelings on that.
It doesn't happen that often. It happens rarely. For the most part, I can communicate with people and work out the issues, and it either gets corrected on one end or the other.
And if they aren't happy with your response, is there a next level that happens? Do they go to your board? How does that typically work?
Well, if it happened, it could.
Yeah, I don't know, it hasn't happened.
Thing.
Because you guys have regular board meetings, I would
But
assume.
normally what happens in this situation that you're discussing is it escalates to a bully match, and then it goes to Facebook, and then it's everywhere. And at that point, you've discussed it in public, what can I add to that? You know, it doesn't, civility is dead.
Yeah, and cancel culture seems to be alive, right, so.
And actually, what has happened in the past is people came to the select board for a remedy. And then, of course, we're told that the select board cannot remedy anything because you are a private company. So that's some of the awkwardness here that we're trying to navigate.
So you keep calling us a private company, but we are a
Which you are, correct?
nonprofit corporation for a reason. Okay, do you understand why?
I understand what kind of a company you are.
Okay, good. So then you understand why it is that way.
I just want to be clear too, that, you know, the back and forth right now, at least, you know, from my standpoint, is the recognition that this is not we are not talking about a contract. The contract never got off the ground, so to speak. And that was before my time, before this particular board. It was presented to you then. This is also not a editorial and Brentwood newsletter editorial board meeting, because I don't have a say in that, and I understand that. This, for the good of the order, for everyone to understand, is an attempt to find a compromise, an attempt to find a middle way based on, and we can all sit here and pretend it isn't real, but it is real, that we have a lot of people who feel one way and a lot of people who feel the other, and we had a lot of that input come our way today via email. Don't fund the newsletter unless there's a contract. Fund the newsletter because you have no choice because the town voted the warrant article up. It's like these two sides. So, again, this and the previous 2 weeks of discussions is about, can we find a compromise and a middle way to go forward so that you know, people can open the newsletter and feel comfortable that they understand basically the guidelines and principles and mission statement and all that, and that they understand that all the discussions leading up to this was not didn't just fall into the emptiness. It's been acknowledged and it's been addressed. So, you know, that I don't think that this, you know, I think everyone agrees that we have to come to a conclusion on this so that we can all move on. And so I guess those are the points anyway, to answer your question. Those were the points that I didn't see in your version, and I had hoped to see. I understand your explanations. I appreciate your explanations as to why they're not in there. And again, just to restate that if Joe Smith wants to complain about trash in his neighborhood and wants to do it anonymously, I'm okay with that.
Can I ask you one last question?
Yes.
Are you now saying that you believe there should be a contract? Because you adamantly said you did not believe there needed to be a contract, as did Andy at our meeting 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think what I was saying was that the contract that was on the table was not something I would.
That's not what you said. You said we did not need a contract.
Well, yeah, that at the end, okay. So the idea was that there would be a middle way, not a contract, right? And not nothing. That's what I said, right? We can't come back to the table, to the board, with nothing on paper. And we also are not going to have a contract because you made it clear, no contract. And if I'm not mistaken, legal counsel said to you that.
Advised against that.
Right.
Yes.
So, the contract, as I said, never got off the ground. It's not You know, as far as I'm concerned, we've moved on from that aspect of it.
But,
It's also not really standard policy for the town either. You know, I did inquire about that and received an answer that no other volunteer organizations, no other volunteers are required to sign a contract, so that's just,
Yeah, I mean, I guess
why
it.
are we even talking about it anymore?
Well, I guess if those volunteer organizations have, you know, basically an opportunity to spread widely opinions that create divisiveness in the town, then I guess, you know, then we're gonna end up there with them as well, I guess, but that's unlikely. You have a unique, there's a unique product involved, and that's the newsletter itself. You know, and I don't know, I get the sense from you, Robin, that, you know, you as well as many others have learned a lot from the last, maybe it's not things you necessarily wanted to learn, but you've learned a lot about, you know, running a newsletter and then dealing with controversy and dealing with everything that's been going on. And, you know, I feel like you don't want to see a repeat of what has happened over the last 2 years, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I think those are pretty obvious words.
I think we actually said those words, more or less.
Yeah.
That, you know, give us a little credit, don't you think we learned a few things, and do you think we would ever try to travel down that road, or risk traveling down that road again?
Yeah. No, I heard you, and, you know, and that's, again, that's what led to, you know, I think, Michelle, I think you asked me point blank, do you believe us? And I said, yes. And I said, but I can't go back to the board and half the town who is demanding more and say, take my word for it. And I think everybody understood that sitting at the table that day, right? I mean, so that led to, let's get something in writing. And that led to,
Which we did.
yeah, and that led to 2 weeks now of trying to come to an agreement on a document that was a good compromise. And in my view, we didn't quite get there. You've explained though why, you've explained your reasoning, and I'm personally, I'm glad that we had the opportunity. I'm glad that you were willing to allow the discussion to happen.
So Russ, is there anything that you'd like modified or changed to ask them if they will do that before we take a vote?
I mean, of course, I'd be open to modifying, but I'm getting the impression that there's not.
Well, so you said we didn't need a contract, we needed something in writing. We brought forth something in writing. So the way I see it is, the town at town meeting said no contract. There was an amendment asking for a contract, they said no. Am I correct? Okay, so then you asked us for something and we gave you something. How is that not in the middle?
Well,
How is that not in the middle?
I guess
What's missing that you need?
what I would like to know from Russ is like what Andy just asked. What would you like to see that maybe is not in what I read earlier?
I feel like if we ran the tape back, you would hear the things that I said weren't in there.
That are still in.
But I didn't know if you had a specific word you wanted to change or,
Well, okay, so we're gonna go back over this again. I mean, I thought I was clear about the things that are missing, right? So, there is language in here, again, about, that I think could be, that easily could be nuanced to cover the scenarios we talked about where someone submits and it's the last minute, someone submits multiple times, same thing.
so,
There's,
hold on, Russ.
Yeah.
Let's just try to do a point by point so we don't have to come back and revisit it again. in the agreement, or whatever we wanna call this, would you consent to having a time deadline of whatever meets publishing abilities?
If you keep in mind that this is a volunteer effort, we have jobs and a lot of other things to do, so we kind of make this happen in between our actual lives. So, you know, if I have an extra couple of hours here, we can do that. It's kind of hard to,
I'm just trying to make it easier for you of saying, hey, at 2 PM on this day is the last day I'm gonna take something. And you not have to worry that something's coming in at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night. That's all I'm saying.
we can change the date. We can give them an earlier date.
End of the 10th. Yeah, it's just,
It seems very
you
micromanaging.
can't plan for every single issue.
Just for the record, I appreciate what the chairman's trying to do. I didn't ask you to rewrite what I understand that you submitted what you submitted. So, I don't, just,
Yeah.
if you've got more questions on that,
So you don't want to support us, period? Is that what, I mean, I guess the vote hasn't
Michelle,
come yet, but that's.
Michelle,
Russ, I'm asking you.
No, I know, and
I'm not
I-
trying to be agitated, really,
Well,
I mean, we've put a lot of time into this,
yeah,
and we thought we had come to an agreement now twice with you guys, and then,
well, look.
how frustrating do you think it is for us?
Well, look, the first time that we sat down, me and Andy and you two, for 2 hours, it was a document that you provided did not address what we talked about at the end. And still, I suggested and supported another round, but with Bob. All right, because I said, okay, so whatever the reasoning behind it, and I try to give you the benefit of the doubt as much as possible. For whatever reason, the 2 hours we sat on Saturday and discussed did not result in a document that was a compromise. It resulted in a document that stated your previously outlined mission statement and policy statement. So I said, where are the pieces that we talked about? They weren't there. So I said, okay, Bob, why don't you give it a try? It's essentially. And I was okay with another week of that. So this idea that, it wasn't discussed, or that I don't support you, or this or that, it's a heck of a way to ask a question, but I think I've stated what I felt was missing, what I feel is missing, and I don't know what else to say, except that, again, I believe, Robin, I believe you when you say those things. I just wished I had seen them in writing. But I can't, again, I can't make anybody put anything in writing. We tried. I tried, Bob tried. We couldn't quite get there. And so.
So this is a really good example of what we face on Lake for the last 5 years. We were unable to please you. And now we have a town of, we have a subscriber base of 1,360 people.
Mhm.
And we have to strive to please all of them all of the time. And trying to write something to please everyone on every point all the time is an impossible goal. We've done the absolute best we can. I've learned things that I had no idea I needed to know to try to satisfy just in the last 2 weeks. We spent 2 hours with you and Andy, we spent 3 hours with Bob. We probably spent another 6 or 8 hours in between working full-time and everything else, trying to achieve this balance.
Yeah.
So you understand the impossibility of pleasing everyone all the time.
Yeah, it's difficult, and, the time invested is difficult. It's difficult on all of us, and it's not, these aren't one-way conversations. It wasn't 2 hours of me and Andy talking to you. It was an exchange of ideas and thoughts, so, I do appreciate that. We just, right now, fundamentally disagree on this final document that's before us, that was given to us, you know, it was given to us 50 minutes before we started the meeting. I've done my best to, you know, to give it a fair reading, and all I'm saying right now is that it didn't get to where I was hoping it would get, and I just feel like it would have made things a lot easier, and I'm certainly not alone in feeling that it didn't get to where I get the sense that, you know, others wished it had gone further, but it didn't. I don't know what else to say.
So going back to the fundamental split, people who want a contract and people who voted at town. How do you justify not counting the votes, the people who spoke at a legally convened town meeting, had this, we were there, what, 5.5 hours? So at least an hour, hour and a half on this topic alone.
Yeah.
And the people, the legislative body, told the governing body of this town how they want you to spend the money. And it was clear how it was said. So how do you justify just throwing those votes away?
Well, I haven't.
Okay, I'm just asking. How do you think there's any other decision? I mean, I told you in our
I haven't made a decision, but I haven't made a decision.
that the avenue for communication is never closed. You know, I told you in my last email to you that you're always welcome to call. If you have questions, you're always welcome to call.
Yeah. Anyway, no vote has been taken, and I think it's premature to speak to that. I do want to be careful, though. Again, we have been advised as select board members that we are not bound by the town vote on the warrant article. Just stating that as a fact, what we were told. Okay, so that's what I have to go on, among other things. But I'm just saying that's a factor decision.
All right, I'm gonna call this vote. The motion on the floor is to expend $11,781 to the Brentwood newsletter for the issuance of 8 issues. All in favor? I'm an aye. Jen?
No.
Bob?
Aye.
Russ?
Aye.
And John? Quiet, please. John?
Can we confirm Russ is an aye?
Russ is an aye.
Yep.
I'm a no.
Motion carries 3-2.
And I will reiterate to all this board that the avenue of communication is never closed.
Excuse me, can you?
Hold on one second.
Thank you, Russ.
So I will take a couple comments, limited to 3 minutes. There was a gentleman in the back that had a question first. Do you still have a, who's that?
Jim Michaud.
Jim Michaud, did you still have a comment? And you could just state your name and road name for the record.
Jimmy showed I live on Route 125 in Brentwood. My 2 comments were, the first about anonymity. I'm sorry, about...
Anonymity?
Yes. The fact of the matter is, that happens every day in the media. And it's for just what she said. It's for fear of retaliation. And that's part of the First Amendment. I don't understand why that's an issue. Second of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but, and I'm not trying to be a smart guy, but you guys were voted in, and the governing body, the townspeople voted you in. We also voted for this Brentwood newsletter.
Mr. Misha, the motion passed, the newsletter was
I
funded.
understand that.
Alright.
You asked me if I, what else?
Okay, you were just directing to that side of the table, and that side of the table was all ayes, so I was
Well,
just
I understand.
confused.
I just wanted to make a statement.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Leo?
So, we voted the newsletter in at town meeting with the explicit understanding that we were still working on a contract. That was part of the discussion that was there.
So please let her speak.
Rather disappointed that it's not happening, as they still have yet to, we're asking for basic editorial conduct. As a town, we're asking that, this happened multiple times. We're asking that basic editorial conduct, and they can't even, in good faith, do a contract with you guys that they've been working on since what, September? That they were supposed to have been introduced and asked since this summer. The last 2 weeks, we've been asking for this, and honest, and they come and argue you to the point of yes, when you said you weren't happy with what they had there. I'm really disappointed that just they're arguing, and they haven't responded to emails and submissions. I've sent emails and submissions that have had no response back. How are we supposed to be holding this to the funding when they can't even respond back in 2 weeks, and they're arguing with you saying that what you said at one meeting isn't happening at the next? We can't even honor that. I'm disappointed.
So,
I just want
Kim-
to respond.
can I respond first and I'll let you do? So, just to the first part of that, as Jen elated in her statement, we can't oversight the editorial content of the paper.
I understand.
They're a separate, and the only way to do that would be to create a whole different structure. So,
But
now,
by asking the conference,
Russ?
Yeah, again, I take issue, anytime someone puts words in my mouth, or tries to indicate they know how I came to a decision. There are a lot of factors, and it was, as I said, it was good to be able to have a conversation in this setting about our previous conversations with Robin and with Michelle. I think that was extremely helpful for the overall. But to say that that was the reason why I voted the way I voted is to really underestimate how complex this situation is. It's extremely complicated, what we're dealing with from officially from the town perspective and this relationship. Everything I said prior to that, I believe, and I believe it's true. I'm disappointed. I think that trust has been broken, but that doesn't mean necessarily that I can vote based on those feelings. I have to vote on a whole slew of criteria that in the potential that we're opening up the town to other discussions that we don't want to have. And I'm also very mindful that one way or the other, we had to move on tonight. We had to move on, and if the good faith that I believe exists overall doesn't exist, then we're going to find out, and we'll have an issue not too long from now. And I can't predict the future, okay? But I have faith that by being able to vet all this stuff publicly, that we can have some transparency and perhaps some rebuilding of trust again,
All right, Lois and then Ward.
I want to say thank you, everyone. Tonight, the town of Brentwood won. Our town now has our newspaper of 45 years. Our claim to fame has been saved. thank you so much, and it was the right thing for everyone. Everyone here, thank you for what you did, and thank you for this newsletter, because this is Brentwood, and this is, we need to heal and go back to being, that newspaper puts us together. We communicate with each other once in every month, every year. It is terrific, and thank you so much, each and every one of you.
Lois, just for the record, name and street.
Lois DeYoung, Holy Falls Road.
Ward?
Ward Burn, Railroad East Brentwood. I want to thank the board for putting this to bed finally. And personally thank Russ for having the courage and the trust of the people that are going to print this newsletter. And I think it's time to move on from this controversy and let's just get on with living.
Having no business. I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Okay.
Motion and a second. All in favor? I'm an aye. Jen? Bob? Russ? John? Get some sleep, John.
So my question is, if you
Good night.
feel that this contract was a good faith contract, then why approve? But why?
Yeah, I didn't mean to offend you.